Welcome to the Industrial Control System Information Sharing and Analysis Center's monthly public briefing. My name is Debbie Wendell, and I will be moderating today's session. I serve as Community Director for the Center and oversee the Center's human-to-human information dissemination mechanisms. Today's briefing, SARA from the Neck Up, Connecting Knowledge Centers, features a panel of distinguished subject matter experts, including Johan Rambi from DSO Alliander and the EU DENSEK project, and Maarten Van Horenbeeck from FIRST. ISAC Chair Chris Blask will be facilitating today's discussion. During today's presentation, Chris will take the first few minutes to lay out some background information to frame the issue. Then, each panelist will be introduced and have the opportunity to present their opening remarks. Next, the panel will spend about 35 to 40 minutes for their discussion. Finally, there will be time for questions and answers and open discussion at the end of the presentation. At any point during the call, if you would like to ask a question, you may use the hand raise feature or type your question into the chat box in the GoToWebinar application. When speaking, please introduce yourself and indicate your industry affiliation. After the meeting, a recording of this session will be available on the Center's website. So now, without any further delay, Chris, over to you for your background presentation.
Debbie, thank you very much for getting through that with your cold and so forth. You sound wonderful. Thanks for everyone for showing up today, and for all those people watching this out in the future, a big hello from the good old days. So a little word about the ISAC and who we are in the first place. Many of you may know this already, but we're a nonprofit organization with a mission to forward information sharing for the purpose of critical infrastructure cybersecurity. And we do that by connecting entities and communities like FIRST and like DENSEK and others. We look at this cross-sector, we look at this internationally. We'll speak a little bit to that, but we're all connected in this. And we're particularly interested in creating repeatable models where we can show how something can work, we can share that model with others, and they can do this more in their own world. SARA is something we'll touch on today. This is a project we have going on. Interrupt is another one. This is a workforce development program that's getting kicked off in Boston this May for high school students. So what is it we're all doing here? Well, building a global knowledge network is the only answer, to our shared problems with infrastructure. While looking for vulnerabilities is important, while getting asset owners to apply patches is important and a wonderful thing, those paths don't necessarily ever lead us to an actual secure infrastructure. We'll always be a little bit behind. But what we have to do is have facilities who have knowledge of themselves that are able to use knowledge shared with them, and in some cases share it with the rest of us. So we can rotate this model and look at it various ways, but at the end of the day, there's something like this set of players. There are the service providers, the vendors, the integrators who have direct relationships with facilities. In many cases, they're sharing actual data and full-blown information already. There are private centers like the ISAC and others. There are public centers like ICS-CERT here in the U.S. and others out in the world. And we're deep into the process of finding out how we share what information with whom, and how we do this not just human to human, but in real time. So we'll talk some to that. So what's driving all this sharing? Interdependency. Interdependence on every level. At the local level, we have combined infrastructures. You can work in power, you can work in water, you can work in energy or anything else, and it's all connected. At the national level, each nation has infrastructures that are shared ubiquitously between themselves. On the global network, we're all just, on the global level, we're all really just one network. I apologize if Peter wants to advance it. I'll take that in a minute. So what happens in the EU matters in the U.S., both from an infrastructure perspective and also from a vendor perspective. The same product, the same technology, the same communications that happen here in the U.S. are happening in the EU, and they're happening in Asia, and they're happening everywhere else. So there is no other way to address all of this without connecting the dots, without getting information flowing. And what are the barriers we're faced with this? Well, trust is a huge one. We talk about this, all of us, quite often. Who do I share what with? These are human decisions, these are policy decisions, and they're not that well developed today. It's one of the major areas of development of research, and something that we look in our activities to find use cases where we can demonstrate that, for example, as a wastewater facility, here's who we can get information from, how you can apply that. Here's what perhaps in your case you may or may not be able to share with others. We have to consider the commercial interests. There are organizations out there, we want there to be organizations out there to do nothing but manage this information, manage intelligence. We see as one of the indicators that we are, in fact, where we think we are, a great deal of organizations developing and coming out with products and coming out with services today where intelligence is their product. So how do we get that information flowing so that, on the one hand, we don't face a situation where the knowledge exists to solve a threat, but nonetheless, we as a community, we as a nation, we as a global community end up suffering the consequences because the commercial interest can't be served. On the other hand, how do we make sure that these organizations actually have the funds, the budget to hire the people, to hire the analysts and do the work? And liability. And this is a huge issue we talk about all the time, but am I going to get in trouble for sharing this information? And in this whole process, as another indicator that we are where we are, we're seeing things like a recent statement, that it's not a compromise of business ethics and law for information about threats to be shared. And we have examples in place today. Two that I like are how the national labs share information. Argonne National Labs has driven the CyberFed model, and there's real-time knowledge sharing being used for active defenses right now. The REN ISAC has done a great job with the security event system. Academia, many research and university organizations in the U.S. and around the world are now actively sharing information in real time for active defense. For our part, we've got a project called SARA that we began late last year, where we're looking to develop certain guides based on existing methodologies, existing technologies and standards, so that more facilities and more of our partners can get involved in information sharing. And to that end, we're developing this set of artifacts. So there's a guide under development that would at least do these things. There's a SARA server, which is an open source Linux distribution with open source tools, our membership, and we have put together to allow every facility to do at least this much. And there's this network, including the people on the panel today. Many of you I see in the live audience today, and many others that are out there listening in the future are part of this community of sharing that we need to put together. And finally, a set of solutions. As I mentioned earlier, we need to work through and show, for example, the 50 to 100,000 water facilities in the U.S. that if you're a water facility that your community owns, here's how you go about sharing information. And if you are a vendor and you have a product or a solution that actually addresses this need, to provide a platform where you can demonstrate that this actually does work, so that we can do our part in fostering the shared interest of having organizations that do this stuff for a living. So the foundations of the knowledge we're actually sharing comes down really to these four things. Obviously, you can parse this in multiple ways, but at the very least, if you're, for example, a facility, you need to know who you are. You can look at this from an assessment perspective. I have a wastewater facility that's municipally owned. I have these physical assets. I have these concerns. I make my decisions based on what city council edicts. It's got certain legal liabilities. So you can begin to make intelligent, rational decisions about what steps you should take, to secure your infrastructure. You need to know your inventory. If you don't know what you have, you don't know the devices, that information shared with you isn't going to have any use. You need to know what those devices normally do. In an ICS network, in an industrial setting, we have a very strong advantage over the IT world, where we don't have dynamic networks necessarily. In almost all cases, they're very static, they're deterministic, they do certain things. When those things change, you either did that change or you didn't. And if you didn't, you need to know about that right away. It's this level of visibility that industrial operators have into their physical process. They know the temperatures, they know the pressures, they know the voltages, but for interesting reasons today, most facilities don't have visibility into what their control system is actually doing, what their system of having visibility into their process is actually doing. And lastly, sharing. How can I communicate with others? And again, primarily from a facility perspective, we're talking about effectively ingesting and using knowledge that exists in the outside world. and in some cases, for all of our joint benefit, sharing some knowledge of your own information with the rest of us. So lastly, to the end of achieving the SARA project, we've got a pilot underway where there are knowledge centers, such as the people represented on the panel today and others, and working with our membership, including vendors and integrators and others that both have knowledge to share and have connectivity with large numbers of facilities and existing relationships. And with one of our members, Internex, deserves to be mentioned by name, has a fantastic smart grid lab in Knoxville, Tennessee, with a fully operational electric transmission, distribution, smart meter, and smart home setup. So working with vendors and service providers and researchers among our membership, we're rotating through different use cases. For example, in the lab right now, Paul Alto Networks is working with Adam Crane and Automatic on DMP3 command security issues and how that ties into the local facility's ability to manage their own security, use information that's found externally, and again, in some cases where appropriate, share some knowledge with the rest of us. So with all that said, Debbie, if you want to introduce our speakers, each speaker is going to give a short presentation, and then we'll get into the active discussion. Obviously, anybody on the phone now, please feel free to raise your hand, send a chat message in. Debbie, the floor is yours.
Maarten Van Horenbeeck is chairman of the Forum of Incident Response and Security Teams, or FIRST, the premier organization and recognized global leader in incident response. In addition to his FIRST chairmanship, he has served as a member of their board of directors since 2011. Maarten has over 13 years of professional experience in information security, most recently at Amazon, Google, and Microsoft, where his work focused on building technical community and relationships within the incident response communities. Originally from Belgium, Maarten now lives in Seattle, Washington, and holds a master's degree in information security from the Edith Cowan University in Western Australia. Chris, back to you.
Maarten, the floor is yours. Just give me a next, and I will advance the slides for you.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Chris. And first of all, thank you very much to the ISAC for inviting FIRST to actually present in this forum. I'll first start off with a really quick introduction into what FIRST does as an organization, and then I'll share a little bit with you about our views on building community and building sharing platforms. So first of all, FIRST has existed since 1990 and was actually formed shortly after the outbreak of the Morris Internet War. At the time, it was an organization of just less than 10 incident response teams, mainly in the United States, that were initially starting to explore how to work together during these major incidents. However, FIRST has grown quite a bit. Today, we are over 293 members in over 64 countries. Our goal and vision for FIRST is to be a premier organization in incident response, and that actually is not operational, and that's maybe something that I should start off with. FIRST itself does not have operational capability to deal with security incidents. Instead, we work to be a forum and a place where all the teams and the different sharing centers and computer incident response teams that are working to deal with incidents come together. Next slide, Chris. On this slide, you can see a little bit about our geographical representation. So today we're over 293 teams. We actually grew a little bit at the beginning of this week, and we're fairly spread out across the globe. Now, you can see that there are gaps, and those are gaps that we are trying to address, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that later. Next slide. FIRST, as an organization, achieves its goals mainly through a couple of main efforts. First of all, we create locations, we create events where our members can share experiences in dealing with security incidents. We also promote the development of standards within the industry. For instance, as an organization, we allow our members to provide feedback into established standards mechanisms both outside the organization, such as ISO and ITU, and inside the organization. FIRST actually currently maintains the CVSS vulnerability scoring system, and this is a standards group within FIRST. And we have a few other of those groups working on slightly less known but equally important standards for sharing centers and incident response teams to be able to exchange information amongst each other. Our goal is also to create and expand the incident response community. So when a new team stands up in a particular country, we will work with that team to help them become members and help them become well connected with their industry. And in that respect, FIRST is also fairly wide in scope. We do not just represent, or we do not just work with national incident response teams. We actually also work with teams that are, for instance, active within an enterprise. Many of our members are actually enterprise incident response teams. We also have a fairly large representation from academia. And then, of course, we also have quite a few of the national incident response teams that have responsibility for their respective country. And our goal is that we allow FIRST members to use combined knowledge, skills, and experience to help create a safer internet. Next slide. One of the ways that we bring teams together is to an annual conference which we organize, which essentially gives our members a forum to share information on incidents that they have worked on in the last year or techniques and technologies that they have developed. That conference tends to travel around the world. The last one was in Bangkok, Thailand, and this year we're actually going to be in Boston, Massachusetts. We also organize symposia and technical colloquia, which are smaller events mainly focused at getting our members from a particular region together or getting individuals and teams from a particular sector together. For instance, at the end of last year, we organized an energy sector symposium, which was in partnership with ISAC. Within the organization, we also provide best practices documents. We create mailing lists and groups so that teams can exchange information, and we have a bunch of discussions that take place on a regular basis, for instance, on standards that are currently being discussed within ISO or ITU. Next slide. Within the group, we also have committees and special interest groups that bring together specific teams that have common interests. For instance, each year we organize the annual conference, and we actually devise the program of the conference in partnership with our member teams. They can actually participate in a program committee which decides on those topics that are very much of interest to our membership. And this is really important because we tend to get about 3 times as many applications for talks than we actually have room to accommodate them in a week-long conference. So we need to be quite selective, and we allow our members to help set the agenda for that event. Then we also have a large number of SIGs, which are special interest groups that bring together those teams with a common interest. For instance, we have a group called the Vendor SIG, which brings together many of the core internet infrastructure vendors and allows them to debate security issues. We also have other groups focused on measuring the effectiveness of a CSIR team or on developing particular standards. For instance, CVSS is also a special interest group within FIRST. We also operate a number of bird of a feather sessions, which tend to be less structured and take place at one of our many events throughout the year. Next slide. Now, what I would like to get into in this panel later on is actually the way that we look at sharing partnerships. And when I saw this particular map, which is a map created by Telegeography, one of the things that stands out is that the world is becoming more and more connected. So there's a lot more connectivity between countries and between networks that allows us to work together and actually connect the different work streams that are being affected within many of the sharing organizations. However, in our opinion, connectivity is not all we need. What we really need is connectedness. Next slide. And connectedness really comes down to 3 things. First of all, when you as an organization work with a sharing center, one of the things that needs to be established is trust. So within organizations and between organizations, there is a lot of effort that needs to be put into creating some norms as to what are the expectations. Because the only way that one organization will share something with another organization is if they have a good understanding what the other organization will do with that information, how it is protected, and what the end result of that work is going to be. And in order to do that, we need to get to know each other. And within FIRST, we do this very much using our conference. A large portion of the membership is represented each year, and we actively try to stimulate that so that they can talk and work with other teams. For instance, one of the very best examples I've ever seen of this was actually during the very first conference that I ever attended. At the end of the day, I bumped into 3 different national CSIR teams from Europe. And one of them said to the others, let's go and develop this piece of code for our sharing tool to share abuse reports. And so they all actually went out to a pub afterwards and started coding the actual code that needed to be written to make these systems interact. This is one of those examples of what we try to foster at the conference and at our events. Finally, there also needs to be some vetting of basic capabilities. And within FIRST, we actually do this as part of the membership application process. So becoming a FIRST member is not as easy as simply paying a membership fee. Instead, an organization has to find 2 sponsors that are existing members that are willing to support the organization's application. And one of those sponsors will actually need to vet the capabilities of the applying incident response team against a checklist that was developed many years ago and has recently been updated of the capability. So we actually check the maturity of teams before they enter FIRST. We don't only want the very best teams, but we want to have teams that are able to communicate with each other at about the same level and that they at least use the same vocabulary when they are speaking about particular types of incidents. Next, we need to build capability between teams. And capability exists both in the technical realm, as in being able to do certain things, but also in the process realm, as in knowing when it is needed to do something. And within FIRST, we actually have been focusing quite a bit on training in the recent past. We just organized, in partnership with Terena in Europe, an incident response team training in Côte d'Ivoire, and we're actually doing another one in Djibouti in a couple of weeks. And as an organization, we try to support organizing these trainings, particularly in places where there are currently very few teams that are working within our FIRST community. Second, awareness is very important. We need to understand what the issues are and what important ways are to dealing with it. So for instance, we provide room at our events for other organizations like the OECD to discuss their CSIRT indicator working group, and we work with them so that they can work with our internal metrics working group and align their efforts. Many of our members also publish different bits of security intelligence to the outside world, and what we try to accomplish is that at our events, teams actually start sharing information on what worked and what didn't work. For instance, did blocking port 25 result in a reduction in spam, or is enabling something like DKIM or DMARC more effective? And then finally, there's technical sharing. Within FIRST, we do not focus on sharing immediately within the organization. In fact, we have so many members that not every member can trust every other member. That would be a nice goal, but it's also unlikely to be achieved. What we focus on is getting those members into a group so they can work on data sharing formats, data sharing technologies, and can then deploy them with the teams that they feel comfortable with. And then finally, there's also a whole bunch of sharing of skills that need to happen. For instance, if you look at some impactful malware over the last few years, such as Win32/Duku, which exploited a particularly difficult to analyze vulnerability, not every CSIR team and not every FIRST member will be able to investigate an attack quite as detailed as that. So they need to find other teams that can and share experiences. Another example is Dexter, which was banking malware that first showed up in South Africa and is now seen across the globe. Next slide. Thank you. So that is really all that I wanted to share with you moving into this panel discussion. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Maarten. And a note on the training first provides a training called Transit to help organizations set up certs, and they'll be providing a version of that our conference in Atlanta in September. So for those who are interested in those sort of things. So Debbie, if you want to intro Johan, I'm going to turn off sharing for just one moment while I pull up his slides.
Johan Rambi is Alliance Manager for Privacy and Security at Alliander, where he supports the organization as subject matter expert in the areas of smart meter privacy and security and smart grid SCADA cybersecurity. As a former privacy and security officer, Johan implemented and monitored controls of the Privacy Audit Proof certification for smart metering processes in the organization. Until 2012, Johan was chairman of the Dutch National Policy Committee, who developed the privacy and security standards for the smart metering infrastructure. In Europe, Johan is active in several European expert groups and standardization committees on smart meter privacy and security, as well as smart grid SCADA cybersecurity, and is a highly sought-after speaker at conferences on these topics. Prior to joining Alliander, Johan worked as security architect and consultant at various organizations for over 15 years. Chris, back to you.
All right, with that, Johan, if you want to walk through your intro comments, I will show that and follow along with your next.
Okay, thank you very much. And yes, again, many thanks that I could be present here to give you a short overview of what we are doing in Europe and what this EU SIP project DENSEK is doing. Just a question, Debbie, is this the latest one that I have sent now, a few minutes ago?
I believe so. I forwarded on to Chris. He's doing the screen share.
Okay, all right. I could also take over the screen. I have it on my laptop. I don't know if that's possible, Chris.
Yeah, I'll pass it over to you. Just talk for a moment, and I will give you the ball.
Okay. Yes, I will start with this project. Oh no, maybe I will better start with myself as an introduction. Yes, I work at Alliander. Alliander is the Dutch DSO in the Netherlands. We are the biggest one in the Netherlands, and we serve electricity and gas. Could you see this picture?
Yeah.
See my screen? All right. So Alliander is DSO. We serve electricity and gas, and yeah, we are very active at this moment to deploy the smart meter and also to implement smart grid appliances in our grid. In order to facilitate any the developments that is that's happening in our area, especially in the medium and the low voltage area. So developments like the huge amount of PV panels and also the huge use of electric vehicles. Yeah, we have to deal with that. So in order to still facilitate that, we are investing a lot of money to have technology in our grids. So in order to still perform our primary purpose to have a delivery of electricity and gas. Security and privacy we take as highly serious. We want to put that in design. So with each investment or each change, we take privacy security very seriously. But that's not it. We also want to change the culture and mindset of Europe, as we are interconnected with each other. And this project will help us in a way that we can make a difference. We can change the attitude, the knowledge, to join forces. The aim of this project, it's a project that is funded by the European Commission. It's within the Critical Infrastructure Protection Program, and it's all about joining forces to increase the knowledge and also the attitudes in the energy sector. Next slide. Let me see the next slide. It's coming. Yeah, so these are the consortium partners in this project. So we're doing that together with the Italian Enel and two small medium enterprise organizations, Global Cybersecurity Center from Italy and Security Matters from the Netherlands, University of Gdańsk in Poland, and ENCS, the European Network for Cybersecurity, as facilitating partner. The objective of this project is to join forces and to involve the whole supply chain to improve the know-how and awareness of all stakeholders. So if I mean the whole supply chain, that's from the generation part up to the customer premises, also the stakeholders who are involved. I will come back to that later, but it's not only the utilities who we want to include in this project. We have 3 deliverables, and I will go through each of them. But first, that's the main thing that we have to set up. That's to create an European energy ISAC. We don't have that yet in Europe. We only have a European financial ISAC, but this will be the second one. And yeah, we believe that now is the moment, also based on the best practices of national ISACs in Europe and also of the European financial ISAC, and also based on the benchmarking of other ISACs. So we want to set up this European Energy ISAC. We want to support it with an information sharing platform that will help us supporting this distribution of the information, or to share on a digital way. And we have an optional situation awareness network that you can see as an option for operators that want to inform each other if there's any alert going on based on their monitoring and detection systems. I will come also to that point because that has a lot of similarities, I think, with your SARA project. The first European Energy ISAC. So what I mentioned before, it's not only utilities that we are aiming for. There are also vendors, academia, government, standardization organization, and certain other ISACs that we want to include. That is different than other national ISACs that we know in Europe. Also the financial ISAC do not have that way of the stakeholders who are involved. But yeah, we believe this can happen. This is still possible if, and I heard that also before, if there is trust, if there are peers that you want to share with. We did 2, let's say, trial stakeholder sessions with selected people that we know, and they're also part of these categories. And yeah, it proved that it can work and that you can invite them as well, as long as there is a trust based on personal relationship. So this is our scope for the European Energy ISAC. I mentioned, it's all about trust, and we have, of course, circles of trust, peer groups that we can create, so that it's up to your desire, or up to your way of sharing. And we are defining this also with a closed small group of key stakeholders that we invited to participate already in the beginning of this project as a reference group to co-develop these requirements of the European Energy ISAC and the terms of trust. So each category we have 1 or 2 key stakeholders, and they will join us as a reference group to to provide this European Energy ISAC with us. The sharing platform, that will be a supporting tool. That's not, let's say, not that real specific. We want, of course, it must facilitate these trust circles and the way of sharing. But we are aiming for the European Energy ISAC and also the key stakeholder group to develop the requirements for this information sharing platform. Situation awareness network, that's something that we see as an example, as a test case for, I can say a future way of sharing information amongst operators of utilities. What are we doing? We want to show and we want to demonstrate how we can create a model to monitor our ICS systems in a way that these alerts can be detected, can be gathered, and also in a dashboard can be shown. We are doing that now with Alliander and Enel. We are the 2 utilities that will run as a test, will run in this testbed environment. And then we want to create a way that there is a sharing of these alerts, which are trusted parties, which are trusted operators, so that you can warn them if there are alerts that can also be affected to them. So this is an option. We already discovered that this is a very innovative thinking. Utilities are not used to this, especially disinformation. But we believe, Enel and Alliander believe, that also this can work in a matter of time and also in a matter of trust. So this is the 3rd deliverable that we want to do as a demonstration, but it will not be operational from start. The first 2 will be operational, and that will be also in let's say more than 1 year. We already started in 2013, so in more than 1 year, in July 2015, we must have a live operating European Energy ISAC with an information sharing platform. So this is the roadmap, it's a very tight schedule, but we will believe this can work because we already have a group of key stakeholders who could also be the ambassador of this European Energy ISAC initiative, and could be the first members, of course, as they also co-develop the requirements. So with this approach, we believe it can work. This is the roadmap for setting up the Energy ISAC work package. We will organize 3 meetings. First one will be already in June, 18th and 19th of June, where we have a 2-day workshop with the key stakeholders. Then at the end of the year, Q4, 4th quarter, we will also do that, and also with them go through the situational network and platform. And then in the 2nd quarter of 2015, we have a last meeting, and that will be the last meeting before we start this European Energy ISAC. So this is a short explanation. The initiative, the setup of an EU project, DENSEK. You can read a lot more and see our movie on the DENSEK site. It's a very nice movie that will explain why we do this and what we are doing in the 3 deliverables. Okay, many thanks for your attention and the possibility to say this to you.
Thank you, Johan. And so from this point, we'll just have an open conversation about these things. Lord knows we can talk all day. I will start. I'm going to ask the really both of you to comment on the same question about time. I'll start with Maarten. But because I think it's critical that people understand where they are in this whole process. And we've got a lot of conversation in the industry, in the industrial industry, that we're not moving forward, we're not making progress. I think that we really are. Now that being said, we've got to drive a curve that has to hopefully stay just ahead of the curve of our attackers. And it's I think realistic, to look at the attacker curve over periods of from now to 3, 5, 7 years. You can imagine the capabilities and the threats we're facing are going to be very specific. So Maarten, if you wouldn't mind just providing some thoughts on where we are in time, with the perspective of FIRST and the other things you've done, has progress been made in the sharing among centers issue, organizations getting together and sharing information, and do you see it developing in time to address the threat? Of course, anything else you want to talk about as well?
Sure, thank you, Chris. I think at this point in time, we're actually at a place where sharing and situational awareness is developing very, very rapidly, but it is actually developing very rapidly within certain closed groups. So it is very difficult for an organization that does not yet have ties with those groups to find the level of connection where they're able to share and benefit from the sharing of others. So that's a situation that I see today for a lot of organizations. Larger enterprises that have individuals who already know a lot of people in the sector generally tend to have no issues finding ways to share information. Smaller organizations are having a very difficult time finding places where they can share. And I think a lot of this actually does have to do with the fact that sharing for a long time had some negative connotations. People looked at sharing and they look at it as a very bland and open term. It consists of sharing all the data that is needed to prevent an attack. And for some reason, I'm concerned that many people have actually gotten accustomed to the fact that sharing means sharing data that might actually pose issues. And as you mentioned earlier, Chris, very recently there was actually a statement in the United States that sharing does not necessarily need to violate, for instance, antitrust and other issues or privacy. And I think that's a very important thing for those smaller organizations to also realize, that the sharing of information in itself is not a bad thing. It is what information is shared and how it is shared that actually does matter. And in most cases, the situational awareness that an organization needs to protect itself from attacks does not need to be information that's actually very privacy relevant or very important from other perspectives that might make it very sensitive to share. I think in many ways just having an idea of the type of attacks that your peers in the industry are seeing, the higher level situational awareness that Johan was also referring to. It's that type of information which is actually going to be the most valuable and is going to be the entry point into being able to share and being able to work together. So to summarize that really quickly, I think we're at a place where sharing today is very possible once you're already connected into those communities. And so I think there's a lot of importance to organizations such as DENSEK, which is starting up with this new project, or ICS, ISAC, or FIRST, to reach out to smaller organizations that may not be very well connected in the community yet. And as we connect them, sharing is going to be more valuable and more relevant, even for those enterprises.
Yeah, thanks. And I agree very much. And before this session, you and I were talking about language and the ability to actually communicate. And I find this as an indicator of where we are. One of our board members, Sean McGurk, who had created the ICS CERT, the NKIC, the ICS CABG, and so forth, in some of our early conversations, he made a statement that is reflected in the way I talk today, the words I use. Because we're got enough information sharing, we need to share knowledge. And I think it's incumbent on those of us in the roles that we have here, including a lot of our audience I see out there, that we're very careful what words we use. I think the largest barrier we have to information sharing right now is that fear, is the, how much trouble do I get into? So when we talk about it, we do what I did today with my slides. Knowledge sharing is mostly about giving it to you so you can use it. And when we look at the advantages we can get, and this is why I tend to believe that while it's a challenge and we may not make it, I think we have the opportunity to address these threats. When we look at issues on the national level, as the U.S., for example, we have basically 0% visibility of what's going on in our infrastructure. 1% changes everything. We don't need every facility out there to share even just basic knowledge, but we do need some. And that moving forward is an important part of it. So Johan, if I can ask you the same sort of question. So since you're both with an energy provider and in the process of setting up, as you say, the ISAC, and to build on Johan's point, we agree very much that having the vendors and the integrators and the others as part of the community is critical. They're, I think, they themselves already, existing portals to many of the small, medium businesses out there. So we'll give you the floor for a while if you want to take that and add anything you like. Feel free.
I have what Maarten mentioned about you can always do that on your own. You can have your people that you can share with, and I have had that experience with my, let's say, network or what my contact persons from different European utilities. But I discovered that if I share information with NL, and NL share information with EDP, and EDP will share information with E.ON, that it's very ineffective, and it's also about if I have the time or if I want to do that, and of course if you meet each other then you say yes, but it was not coordinated, but everybody was agreeing that we should share, and everyone had the same mindset that we should do that. So when there was a call coming up from the European Commission, we immediately put in a proposal that this is the moment, as we also have to work closely together right now, extremely work together in this, let's say, in this period, and that was for us, let's say, the right timing to make this happen, because there were some initiatives in the past, or there was some discussion about it, and that all stranded. But we believe now it's, we call that new thinking, to change the mindset from, let's say, old conservative way of building the high walls, of this new thinking that we collaborate with each other to have let's say, all improvement of security. Therefore, and I did not mention in my presentation, I forgot, therefore we will also want to go to the US, where we will meet you, Chris, and also the chairman of the ISAC in May, to talk with you, to connect, but also we went last week to Japan, to the Control System Security Center, because the global sharing point is very important for us. Also to Japan, we have a let's say, a close relationship, where ECS has a let's say, member of understanding with them. They work together to train people with a, let's say, same way of red team, blue team training in The Hague, but also to come up with a good testbed location, testbed environment for both organizations. So collaboration is for us main key now, and I think in Europe the biggest challenge will be that we have 27 member states, 27 opinions. But we want to start it small, with that small group of key stakeholders, and then we want to make it that tight and that good that it will be a snowball that is strong enough to keep on rolling. And with Enel and Alliander, yeah, we can we are very positive that it can work.
Yeah, and I think you're exactly right. We're at the point in time where pardon me, my screen sharing thing is, there we go. We're at the point in time where this work needs to be done, and one of the points that I find worth repeating an awful lot, particularly with an audience like this. I know those on the phone now, and a lot of the kinds of folks who will be watching this in the future do this stuff for a living, and we're doing it all the time. And the typical mode we go through at a period like this, where we've been doing it for years, and we get tired of saying the same thing over and over, and we start to wonder whether it's ever going to happen. And it's critically important at times like this, when things are actually starting to happen. You can look at, in my experience, the beginning of the firewall market and various other things. When you realize that the next 5 years, what you really need to do is repeat yourself. Just because this small group understands the issue and has been at it for a long time without perhaps the broad acceptance that they thought might have been there, doesn't mean that anybody else understands it at all. I know even inside our industry, when the conversations I have, that we have with all sorts of groups, there's lots of brilliant people who are dedicated to this and working all the time, but they're not in a position to hear these conversations with folks like yourselves. And Johan, I think your experience going through this process right now, the EU has not gotten there. Now is the time. 5 years ago, you couldn't have gotten it done. 5 years now, we have to have it. We have to have it done. So, Maarten, just wanted to to stir the conversational pot a little bit. Johan had talked about the issue of scale. The EU, you have 27 countries. With FIRST, you have almost 300 members, and you touched on the the beer-inspired trust model, which we're very used to. And I'm interested in your thoughts, and I'll throw mine out before I get there because I'm like that. But I believe that we've sort of hit the wall there. Yes, we have to have these personal relationships and trusted relationships that we develop individually between each other. But we see many artifacts, whether it's from the U.S. federal government or other structures, where the ability to scale a one-to-many conversation, is lower the efficiency really quickly. So, if you want to talk to me about this, or take a topic that's top of your mind, but how do we get past that? How do we develop relationships where we can share information with someone else, where we're building mesh networks instead of star topology networks of knowledge sharing?
It's a very good question, and I was thinking through that actually while I was listening to Johan, because it is easy to say we need to involve smaller organizations more, but the reality is the more organizations that one particular organization ends up sharing with or working with, the less scalable it actually becomes and the more difficult it becomes to maintain those relationships. Within FIRST, we actually sometimes see this problem with regards to membership applications. Quite often, especially now that we're looking at trying to build more relationships with members in areas that currently do not feature a lot of existing members. We also have questions as to what degree is this team really an incident response team, and are they doing the things that one would expect an incident response team to do? And within the organization, we have actually mainly dealt with this by leveraging our existing network. So within FIRST, there are a number of CSERTs that are particularly committed to capacity building and working with the international community. And there always tends to be someone who knows someone and is able to broker that introduction. But as you said, that doesn't really bring us to a point where an organization might be interested in sharing with another organization. And I think that's where today, at an international level, the national CSERT community can actually provide some assistance. It's always going to be very difficult for an organization to work directly with a peer organization in another country because they might not have any type of relationship or any type of partnership there. but by working with, for instance, a European energy sector ISAC, suddenly for an American corporation, a European energy sector corporation becomes reachable. So I think it is really important to work on building these very dense meshes of networked organizations within a particular region, and then it is important for other organizations to connect those meshes to each other so that there is always an ability to reach out and there is always an ability to share certain information. One other model that I have seen develop in that particular context is actually the anonymous sharing type of developments. For instance, within certain organizations in Europe, there's actually a tool being developed called MISP, which allows organizations to anonymously share information with certain target networks and then only be connected to actually share knowledge around that information once they both identify that they have been affected by the same type of incident. So that's one way of sharing very technical information much more widely within a network where trust may be an issue. But I really think that at a knowledge and situational awareness level, it's going to be around creating these local meshes like Johan is doing in Europe and like yourself, Chris, are also supporting here in the US, and then connecting those meshes together and making it possible for organizations to use a mesh to reach out to a particular organization, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. And we find this, and again, I frankly find no fault with organizations and individuals who have been working on this in the past. It's a tough issue, and it's been hard enough. It's one of the indicators of where we are in time, you know, for my purposes of looking at all this, is where FIRST is, you know, and where the whole, you know, national CERT community has evolved to. But the you know, at the end of the day, so we hear discussion all the time. You know, from the moment, you know, the topic of starting this center came up, you know, it's like, oh my God, I'm another one. You know, which one am I supposed to listen to? And you know, we haven't delivered that answer yet, but the answer has to be not all of them, because that's impossible. You know, even organizations like all of ours, because this is what we do, we can't talk to everybody. You know, we need to talk to an organization like FIRST, an organization like DENSEK and the ISAC, rather than trying to make direct connections with everybody in the world. We've gone to the point today where there's too much information, even what happens just now and just today. If you focus on a particular issue like we're talking about, you can't keep up with what just happened. So this is part of the evolution I see over the next couple of years. And Johan, who for in our last few minutes, but if you wanted to talk to that, I think that's you've spoken to it well enough. And again, if you want to take some other comment you want to get out there before Debbie dances us out of this session, and focus on network.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, we are very looking forward to come over to the US and to talk with you, Chris, and to how we can collaborate, to connect with each other, and also with Tim Roxy from ISAC. But we're also going to talk with the Department of Energy and with the cybersecurity director of the White House, Lara Moore, to, let's say, create an EU-US relationship on information sharing, and not in a way, let's say, on a political way, but more in an operational way, that we really doing something together instead of liking each other. And I also want to set up this relationship with Japan, so that we have from both sides a good connection that we can use for our European members of the European Energy ISAC. Yeah, that will be the aim for the next months for this project.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it as well. It's certainly fascinating times. I want to thank Johan and Maarten for your time here today, for everything you do. Certainly everybody who's taken the time out of their day to listen to this directly, and all you out in the future who are watching this as well. And if I can go through this quick enough there to the membership that provide us the support and the intelligence we have to do all this. So, Debbie, if you would like to perform the final rituals here, I'll pass it back to you, and just look forward to hearing from any of you out in the future.
To our distinguished panelists, thank you so much for your thoughts and insights you've shared on today's call. And to our audience, on behalf of all of us at the ICS ISAC, we appreciate your joining us today. We hope that you found the information of value and something that you can take to further enhance your organization's cybersecurity posture. Our next public briefing will be held Wednesday, May 21st at 1 p.m. Eastern Time and feature a panel of distinguished subject matter experts presenting Teaching to Fish, Interrupt, the CICSP, and the Workforce of Tomorrow. Other sessions will be announced in our monthly updates, on the Center's website, and in our other communication vehicles. As a reminder, a recording of this session will be available on the ICS ISAC Briefing Archive page. Thank you again for your participation on today's call.